What's the price of a husband's loyalty? For me, it was 12 years and a $5,000 watch he gave to my sister. You're watching The Calm Before the Revenge. I brought a snake into my home, and now she's trying to live my life. I found the box in Nathaniel's glove box this morning. A gold-linked Cartier, heavy, expensive, and tucked under the velvet lining. It's the kind of gift a man buys when he's finally made enough money to think he doesn't need his wife's success anymore. Today was our 12th anniversary. I sat at the mahogany table, the smell of an expensive dinner cooling in the air. Leon, my German shepherd, had his head on my foot. He hadn't wagged his tail since Nathaniel left this morning. Dogs know when the energy in a house shifts. I was wearing an emerald silk gown. I was ready to be the wife. I was ready for a thank you for paying the mortgage, the cars, and his failed startup for 3 years. "We're home," Joan's voice hit the foyer. She didn't sound like the depressed sister who moved in 6 months ago because she was broke. She sounded like she owned the place. Nathaniel walked in behind her. His hand stayed on the small of her back a second too long. Leon let out a low growl from under the table, watching. I looked at him, the man I'd funded for a decade. Then I looked at my sister, wearing my anniversary gift in the house I paid for. They weren't just sleeping together, they were trying to replace me. "You're right, Nathaniel," I said. I stood up and took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine. I do have everything, and I'm going to keep it that way. I walked past them. Leon stayed at my heel, staring Nathaniel down until we were out of the room. I went to my office, locked the door, and turned on the security feeds. Turn the volume up to see what happens when the golden child realizes I'm on to her lies. I'm curious, where are you watching this story unfold from, and what time is it there? Drop a comment below and subscribe to see the moment the mask finally slips. The house was too quiet the next morning. I sat in my office, watching the security monitors. I wasn't looking for an apology. I was looking for a pattern. Around 10 a.m., right when I usually leave for my design firm, Joan came out of her room. She wasn't wearing the oversized hoodie she used to hide in. She was wearing my white silk robe, the one Nathaniel bought me in Paris. She walked into the kitchen. Nathaniel was there, nursing a coffee. She didn't just sit near him, she leaned into him, her fingers tracing the gold Cartier watch on her wrist. "Paige has been so tense lately, hasn't she?" Joan's voice came through the speakers, soft and poisonous. "I feel bad for you, Nathaniel. You work so hard, and all she does is talk about her meetings and her brand. You deserve someone who actually sees you." "She's changed, Joan," Nathaniel replied. "Success turned her cold. You're the only one who reminds me of why I started all this." I watched them. My heart felt like a block of ice. This wasn't just an affair, it was a hostile takeover. By noon, Joan was in my walk-in closet. I watched through a hidden camera as she pulled my charcoal power suit off the rack, the one I wear to close my biggest deals. She put it on and cinched the waist, staring at herself in my full-length mirror. She started practicing my walk. She tucked her hair behind her left ear, exactly the way I do when I'm negotiating. She even picked up my signature lipstick and applied it, tilting her head until she looked like a younger, softer version of me. "Soon," she whispered to her reflection. I closed my laptop. Joan didn't just want my husband, she wanted my empire, my reputation, and my identity. And Nathaniel was helping her build the scaffold to hang me from. Leon Shepherd sat by my desk, his ears pinned back as he watched the screen with me. He knew they didn't belong in those spaces. I picked up my phone and called my lead accountant. "Start an audit on the joint account," I said. My voice was as sharp as a razor. "And I want a full list of every transaction Nathaniel has made in the last 6 months. Don't leave out a single cent." If they wanted my life, they were going to have to pay for it, and the bill was going to be more than they could ever afford. It was 2 a.m. when the screaming started. Not a scream of pain, that high-pitched, practiced wail Joan used whenever the spotlight shifted away from her. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling and counting. 1, 2, 3. Then came the heavy footsteps of Nathaniel running down the hall, not toward our room to check on his wife, but toward hers. "Joan, what is it? I'm here." I sat up, threw on a silk robe Joan hadn't touched yet, and walked toward her bedroom. The door was ajar. The amber lamp cast an amber glow over the scene. Joan was huddled in the corner of her bed, gasping for air, her hands clutching Nathaniel's forearms. "The shadows, they were moving. Nathaniel, I felt like I couldn't breathe," she sobbed into his chest. Nathaniel was stroking her hair, his back to the door. "It's okay, Joan, you're safe. I'm not going anywhere." "Am I interrupting?" I asked, my voice cut through the drama like a blade. Nathaniel jumped, spinning around. He didn't look guilty, he looked annoyed. "She's having a night terror, Paige. For God's sake, have a heart. She's traumatized." "Traumatized by what, Nathaniel? The $5,000 watch she's wearing to sleep?" I stepped into the room. Joan didn't look away this time. She tucked her head deeper into Nathaniel's shoulder, a small, invisible smile playing on her lips. "You're so cold," Nathaniel hissed. "No wonder she feels more comfortable talking to me. You've turned this house into a boardroom." "If this is a boardroom, Nathaniel, then consider this your performance review," I said. "Joan, if you're so terrified of the shadows in this room, maybe you'd be more comfortable in a hotel. I've already packed a bag for you." Nathaniel stood up, chest out. "She's not going anywhere. This is my house, too." "Actually," I said, leaning against the doorframe, "we should look at the deed again. But that's a conversation for the morning. Since you're so intent on being a hero, you can stay here and watch the shadows. I'm going back to sleep. I have a business to run." As I walked away, I heard Joan whisper, "See, she doesn't love you like I do." I didn't stop. I went to my office and locked the door. Leon, my dog, was waiting by the chair. My phone buzzed with an alert. My lead accountant had finished the audit. Nathaniel hadn't just been buying watches. He'd been funneling money into a joint consultancy firm registered in Joan's name. They thought they were playing a game of hearts. I was playing a game of scorched earth. The next morning, I didn't join them for coffee. I sat in my office with my accountant, Sarah, on a secure line. My dog, Leon, sat by the door, his head cocked, listening to the muffled sounds of Nathaniel making breakfast for Joan in the kitchen. "Paige, it's worse than we thought." Sarah's voice was clipped, professional. "Nathaniel hasn't just been using the joint account for gifts. He's been investing in a shell company called JH Creative Developments. The CEO? Joan Oakley." I leaned back, tracking the numbers on my screen. Over $150,000 had been moved in 6 months. My late nights and my talent had been laundered into a dream for a woman who hadn't worked a day in her life. "He thinks he's clever," I whispered. "He thinks he's building her a throne using my bricks." "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked. "Freeze the secondary corporate cards immediately," I said, "and move the remaining liquidity from the joint account into the trust. Leave exactly $500 in there. I want to see how long it takes for the hero to realize his cape is made of paper." I walked into the kitchen just as Nathaniel was sliding a plate of avocado toast toward Joan. She was wearing my diamond studs, the ones I keep in a locked velvet box. She just smiled, her eyes bright with a new kind of arrogance. "Morning, Paige. I'm taking Joan out today," Nathaniel said, not looking at me. "She needs a new laptop for her business venture. I'll just put it on the firm card." "Go ahead," I said, pouring myself a glass of water. "Enjoy the shopping trip." I waited 10 minutes, then 20. My phone buzzed, a notification from the bank. Card declined. Then another. Card declined. I looked up just as Nathaniel stormed back into the house. His face was a deep, angry red. Joan followed behind him, looking like she'd been slapped. "Paige, what the hell is going on? My cards are blocked. I was at the Apple store and I looked like an idiot." I set my glass down slowly. "The firm is undergoing a restructuring, Nathaniel. I've tightened the overhead. Since Joan's business is so successful, I'm sure she can afford her own equipment now." "You're doing this on purpose," Joan shouted. "You're jealous because Nathaniel actually cares about my dreams." "Dreams are expensive, Joan," I said, "and I'm officially out of the charity business. Nathaniel, if you want to fund her life, use your own salary. Oh wait, you haven't had one in 3 years." I turned my back on them. I could feel the heat of their hatred. They were hungry now, and a hungry predator is a predictable one. While I was cutting off the cash flow, Joan had been feeding her mother-in-law a different kind of currency: victimhood. When I arrived at the estate for the monthly family dinner, the air felt thin. I wore a crimson gown that looked like a bloodstain against the white marble floors. My dog, Leon, sat at my feet, his eyes tracking every movement in the room. He didn't like the way the air tasted in this house. "Ah, Nathaniel's," Mother said. Her voice dropped an octave of warmth. "You're late, but then again, you're always so occupied with work." "Growth requires attention. Where's Nathaniel?" Poor Joan had another one of her spells earlier. Honestly, Paige, I don't know how you can be so detached when your own sister is suffering. "It's okay," Joan whispered, stepping into the room. She looked fragile, leaning on Nathaniel's arm. "Paige has a lot on her plate. I don't expect her to understand." The women around the table exchanged looks: pity for the sister, coldness for me. My mother-in-law didn't want a corporate daughter-in-law who asked for receipts. She wanted a spiritual daughter she could mold. "I expect you to sponsor Joan's seat for the junior committee. It's $25,000, a drop in the bucket for you." "You're right, it is a drop in the bucket," I said, leaning back. "But I'm afraid the bucket has a hole in it." I turned to the group. "Actually, I'm glad you're all here. I'm moving all of my sponsorship funds into a private foundation, one that requires a full background check and a history of actual employment." "You wouldn't," Nathaniel hissed, standing up. "I already did. If you want to play house with my sister, you can do it on your own pension, because as of tonight, the Bank of Paige is closed." Nathaniel stopped dead. He saw the look on his mother's face. He looked at me, and for the first time he saw not a wife, but a predator who had finally stopped playing nice. I didn't go home after the gala. I stayed at a 5-star hotel, watching the live feed from my living room on my phone. They were frantic. Nathaniel was pacing the rug, his phone pressed to his ear, likely calling the bank for the 10th time. Joan was curled on the sofa, clutching one of my cashmere throws. Her fragility was gone, replaced by the sharp, panicked look of a cornered animal. "You can't do this, Nathaniel. My name is on the company filing." Joan's voice came through the monitor, shrill and ugly. "She froze the capital, Joan. There's no money in the account to develop anything." Nathaniel slammed his fist onto the sideboard. "She's bled us dry before we even started." I smiled. They thought they were the main characters. They didn't realize they were just guests in a house I built. The next morning, I didn't come home alone. I brought 2 professional organizers and a locksmith. Everything in the guest suite Joan had occupied, everything I had paid for, was going into cardboard boxes. By 9 a.m., the hallway was lined with brown boxes. By 9:15 a.m., the sound of a power drill echoed through the foyer as the locks on the front door, the wine cellar, and my office were replaced with biometric scanners. Joan emerged first, her hair a mess, wearing one of my expensive silk nightgowns. She stopped dead when she saw the boxes. "What is this? What are you doing with my things?" she yelled. "Your things?" I asked, looking up from my tablet. My dog, Leon, was sitting right next to me, watching her with a steady, unblinking gaze. "The clothes I paid for? The skincare? The jewelry Nathaniel gifted you using my business credit line? I've itemized it all. Since it was purchased with corporate funds for a fraudulent venture, it's technically corporate property now." Nathaniel stumbled out behind her, bleary-eyed. "Paige, stop this madness. You're acting like a dictator." "No, Nathaniel, I'm acting like a CEO," I said. I handed him a legal envelope. "This is a formal notice of eviction for Joan. She has 24 hours to vacate the premises. And this," I handed him a second, thicker envelope, "is a temporary separation agreement. You'll find your access to the house is now limited to the common areas. My suite and my office are off limits. If you try to force a lock, the silent alarm goes straight to the precinct." "You can't kick her out. She has nowhere to go," Nathaniel shouted, reaching for my arm. Leon didn't bark. He didn't have to. He stood up, stepped between us, and let out a low, guttural vibration that stopped Nathaniel in his tracks. My dog knew exactly whose side he was on. "She has your mother," I said coolly. "Since they're so close, I'm sure your mother will be happy to host her in that drafty guest room. Of course, without my monthly maintenance check, your mother might have to start charging rent." I watched the realization sink in. I wasn't just taking back my house, I was erasing their comfort. Without my shadow to hide in, they were just 2 parasites in a very expensive cage. "Pack your bags, Joan," I said, turning back to my screen. "The cleaners are coming at noon. Anything left on the floor goes in the trash." I went into my office and shut the door. Through the glass, I watched them cling to each other, not in love, but in a desperate, mutual fear. The mirror was broken. Now they had to look at who they really were. The eviction notice was the match that lit the fuse. Instead of packing, Nathaniel and Joan decided to throw one last desperate Hail Mary. They knew they couldn't beat me in a boardroom, so they tried to destroy me in the court of public opinion. While I was at a late-night site visit, they used the last of the emergency cash to throw an unannounced cocktail party at the house. I walked through the front door at 9 p.m. to find my living room filled with my own clients and colleagues, all holding my crystal stemware and drinking my vintage champagne. "Paige, you're home. We were so worried," Nathaniel said, stepping forward with a look of practiced concern. "Nathaniel said you've been having these episodes. We just wanted to bring some joy back into the house." "Paige, honey, take a breath," Joan added, her voice soft and patronizing. "I know the stress of the firm is getting to you. Everyone here understands. We just want you to get the help you need." The room went silent. I could see the pity in my clients' eyes. They weren't seeing a CEO. They were seeing a woman being painted as mentally unstable by her devoted husband and concerned sister. "The paranoia, the locking the doors, the freezing of the family accounts," Nathaniel sighed to the room. "It's okay to admit you're overwhelmed, Paige. Nathaniel and I are here to take the burden off your shoulders." "You're right, Nathaniel," I said, finally stepping out of his reach. I walked to the center of the room and picked up a glass. My dog, Leon, paced the perimeter of the crowd, his low growl a steady hum that made people shift uncomfortably. "I have been overwhelmed," I said, my voice projecting across the marble. "Overwhelmed by the discovery that my husband has been funneling $150,000 into a shell company for my sister." Nathaniel's face went from concerned to ghostly white. "And Joan, since you're so worried about my episodes, I'm sure you won't mind if I share the security footage from 2 a.m. last night, the part where you were practicing my signature and trying on my clothes while I was at the hotel?" I pulled my phone out and tapped a button. The large media screen in the living room flickered to life. It was a high-definition loop of Joan in my closet, mimicking my walk, and Nathaniel entering the frame to kiss her right in front of my jewelry safe. "This isn't a party," I said to the stunned crowd. "It's a crime scene, and since you're all here, you can act as witnesses. The police are already outside to escort the trespassers, Nathaniel and Joan, off the property." I set my glass down. "Now, who would like a refill? I believe we're celebrating a very public eviction." The morning after the party, the house felt hollow. Nathaniel and Joan were gone, forced into a cheap motel by the police escort, but their stench still lingered in my office. I sat at my desk, my eyes burning from a night spent digging through the digital trail Joan had left behind. I thought she just wanted my husband and my clothes. I was wrong. She wanted my soul, or at least the legal version of it. "Paige, you need to see this," Sarah said over the encrypted line. "I found a secondary portal linked to your professional signature. It's not just the shell company anymore." I opened the file. My breath hitched. Joan hadn't just been mimicking my walk, she had been stealing my voice. For the last 4 months, she had used high-end AI voice cloning software to impersonate me on calls with my offshore vendors. "I'm thinking of stepping back," Joan's voice, filtered through my own vocal cords, played from the recording. "My sister, Joan, she has a vision that I think is the future of this firm. I'd like to begin the process of transferring my voting shares to her. I'm just so exhausted." She was planning to commit me, I whispered to the empty room. My dog, Leon, sat at my side, nudging my hand with his cold nose, as if he could sense the chill in my bones. The plan wasn't just to replace me in Nathaniel's bed. They were building a legal paper trail to prove I was mentally unfit to lead my own company. Every panic attack, every episode they mentioned to the neighbors, it was all evidence for a conservatorship. They weren't just parasites, they were identity thieves. Joan had even ordered a new ID, a passport with my name and birth date, but her face. She was planning to become Paige Gardner. "Sarah," I said, my voice like ice, "cancel the audit. We're moving straight to a criminal referral. I want the FBI's cybercrimes unit on this. And I want the bank to flag every single loan application as identity theft." "What about Nathaniel?" Sarah asked. "He's the one who gave her the passwords." "Nathaniel thinks he's the mastermind, but he's just the accomplice. I want him to watch as the woman he chose over me is led away in handcuffs, and I want him to realize that the only thing he has left in this world is a mountain of debt with my name and his signature all over it." I wasn't just a wife anymore, I was the primary witness in a federal investigation. "Joan," I whispered to the empty hallway, "you wanted my life? You can have the prison cell that comes with it." Then the track intensifies with a sharp, industrial, metallic clanging sound, like a cell door locking. The cheap motel room where Nathaniel and Joan were hiding smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. I knew this because I had a private investigator parked right outside. I wasn't just watching them. I was waiting for the moment they realized the money was truly gone. Inside that room, the romance was rotting. Without my credit cards, Nathaniel was just a man with no job. Joan was just a girl with a stolen wardrobe she couldn't afford to dry clean. "We have to do something, Nathaniel. Paige is going to the feds. She's going to tell them about the loans." Joan's voice came through the live audio transcript on my phone, shrill and ugly. "I told you the voice cloning was too risky," Nathaniel shouted back. "You said she was too busy to notice. Now she's frozen everything, and my mother won't even take my calls." I sat in my leather office chair, my dog, Leon, resting his head on my knee. They were turning on each other. The fragile bird and the hero were finally seeing each other in the harsh, fluorescent light of poverty. But Joan had one last card to play, the ultimate soap opera trope. "Nathaniel, stop. There's something I haven't told you. I was waiting for the right time, but I'm pregnant." "What?" Nathaniel stammered. "Joan, are you sure?" "6 weeks. I'm carrying your child, Nathaniel. We aren't just fighting for us anymore. We're fighting for our family. Paige is trying to destroy your baby's future." I leaned back, a cold smile spreading across my face. I didn't feel shock. I felt a twisted sense of relief. Joan didn't know the one secret Nathaniel had kept from everyone, to protect his fragile ego. 10 years ago, a specialist gave us the results. Nathaniel was sterile. I had spent a decade telling everyone I was the one who didn't want children, just to save him the shame. I had sacrificed my own desire for a family to protect his pride. "A baby? My God, Joan. I'll do anything. I'll sign whatever you want. We'll get that money back from Paige." I picked up the original medical report from my private safe. The paper was yellowed, but the signature of the doctor was clear. "Oh, Joan," I whispered to the empty room, "you just gave me the weapon I needed to finish him." I sent the text at exactly 10 a.m. "Nathaniel, I've had time to think. Maybe I was too harsh. Let's meet for lunch at the Pierre. No lawyers, just us." I arrived early. I wanted the city's elite to see the exact moment the golden couple finally collapsed. My dog, Leon, sat perfectly still beside my chair, his presence a silent wall between me and the rest of the restaurant. When Nathaniel and Joan walked in, they looked like they had crawled out of a gutter and tried to spray paint themselves gold. Joan was already cradling her stomach, her face set in a mask of holy motherhood. "Paige," Nathaniel said, his voice trembling with a fake sense of duty, "I'm glad we're doing this, for the sake of the family, for the sake of the future." "A child changes everything, Paige," Joan added, sliding into the booth. "You wouldn't want your own niece or nephew growing up in a motel, would you?" "A child? It really is a miracle, isn't it, Nathaniel?" I asked, my voice smooth. "After all these years of us trying?" "It is," Nathaniel said, looking down at his hands. "I guess it just wasn't meant to be with us, but Joan and I, we have this connection." "A connection," I repeated. I pulled a manila envelope from my bag and slid it across the table. "I noticed something in the audit, Nathaniel. You told everyone I was barren. You told Joan I was too career-obsessed to be a mother. Actually, it's the perfect time to clear the air." Nathaniel reached for the envelope, his brow furrowed. I found the original lab results from 10 years ago. Dr. Hayes. Permanent sterility. Your sterility, Nathaniel. The color didn't just leave Nathaniel's face. It felt like the air left the entire room. He opened the folder, his eyes darting across the medical codes he had spent a decade trying to forget. "What are you talking about, Nathaniel? What is she saying?" Joan's voice went sharp, the fragile bird act slipping. "He's saying he can't have children, Joan. Not with me, not with anyone," I said, "which makes me wonder, whose miracle are you actually carrying?" "Nathaniel, wait! She's making it up! It's a fake document!" Joan shouted, her hand trembling on her stomach. I stood up, and Leon stood with me. "The settlement offer is off the table, and since you used my money to fund a pregnancy that's biologically impossible, I'm adding insurance fraud to the list of charges I'm filing this afternoon." I walked out without looking back. The war wasn't just over. I had scorched the earth they stood on. I didn't knock. I used my own key, the one I had never surrendered because I was the one who paid the property taxes. Joan Oakley didn't live in a house. She lived in a museum of her own ego. I found her in the sunroom, looking at a brochure for an elite preschool. She didn't even look up as I walked in. "Paige, I assume you're here to apologize for that scene at the gala," she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Joan told me everything. How could you be so cruel to a woman carrying your own flesh and blood?" "That flesh and blood is a fiction, Joan." I poured myself a cup of tea. It was cold, just like the woman across from me. My dog, Leon, sat by the glass door, his eyes fixed on the garden. "Nathaniel is sterile. Joan isn't pregnant. She's just a better liar than you are." The teacup clattered against the saucer in her hand. "Don't be absurd. Nathaniel would have told me." "Nathaniel was too ashamed to tell you," I said, leaning forward, "and you were too busy spending my dividends to notice your son was a shell of a man. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about the mortgage." "The mortgage is handled by the family trust," she snapped. "Correct, and since the family trust is funded 100% by Gardner Design, my company, I've decided to dissolve it. The house is being put on the market on Monday." "You can't. This is the Vance legacy. My husband built this life." "Your husband built the walls, Joan. I've been paying for the roof for 10 years. I pulled a stack of foreclosure notices from my bag. I am now your landlord, and as of this morning, you are behind on your rent." "Where am I supposed to go?" Her voice finally broke. "You can stay here and let the city watch as the movers toss your chairs onto the lawn," I said, sliding a single piece of paper across the table. "Or you can sign this. It's a full, notarized confession regarding the shell company and your knowledge of the embezzlement. If you sign, I'll give you a modest condo in the suburbs, away from the whispers, and I'll keep your name out of the criminal indictment." I stood up. I didn't wait for her to pick up the pen. I knew she would. In this family, loyalty was always for sale. I just happened to be the one with the highest bid. The flashing blue and red lights didn't look chaotic to me. They looked like a clean slate. I parked my car a block away from the motel, the cold wind whipping my hair as I watched the scene unfold through a pair of binoculars. My dog, Leon, sat in the passenger seat, his ears forward, watching the movement around the motel room door. Nathaniel was the first one let out. He wasn't the hero anymore. He looked small, his cheap suit rumpled, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. Then came Joan. She wasn't crying, she was screaming. The fragile bird had turned into a harpy, her claws digging into the arms of the female officer. She was still wearing that white maternity dress, a stained, pathetic reminder of the lie. As they reached the sidewalk, I stepped out from the shadows. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know that I wasn't just the victim, I was the architect of this ending. "Paige, you did this! You set us up!" Nathaniel shouted, his voice cracking as they shoved him toward the patrol car. "I didn't set you up, Nathaniel. I just stopped paying for the cover-up," I said, my voice carrying over the wind. "You and Joan did the rest all by yourselves." "You think you won?" Joan shrieked, her face contorted. "You're alone, Paige. You have your money and your firm, but you have no one. Nathaniel chose me." "He chose a ghost, Joan. He chose a version of me that didn't exist, and you chose a version of him that couldn't provide. It's just a shame the state won't let you share a cell." I turned to the lead detective. "Everything is in there, detective. The identity theft, the wire fraud, and the embezzlement." "Thank you, Miss Gardner," the detective said, taking the drive. "We'll take it from here." As the doors of the transport van slammed shut, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The house was empty, the bank accounts were secure, the parasites were gone. "Sarah," I said into my headset as I got back into the car, "the audit is officially closed. Transfer the recovery fund into the new scholarship for women in architecture. I want something good to come out of this mess." "And the house?" Sarah asked. "Sell it," I said, looking at Leon. He let out a soft huff and licked my hand. "I'm moving. I think I'd like a view of the water, somewhere where I can see the horizon clearly." I started the engine and drove away. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I knew exactly what was behind me, a foundation of lies that had finally crumbled. And I was finally ready to build something that would actually last. The house sold in 48 hours. Cash, no contingencies. I stood in the center of the empty living room, the sunlight cutting through the floor-to-ceiling windows in long, sharp rectangles. There were no voices anymore, no fake panic attacks, no heavy, entitled footsteps. Just me and my dog, Leon. He paced the perimeter of the room once, his claws clicking on the hardwood, before sitting by my side. He didn't look back at the hallway where Nathaniel used to hide his secrets. He was waiting for the door to open. I walked through the guest suite one last time. The biometrics were still active, a digital hum that felt like a heartbeat. On the floor, near the walk-in closet where Joan had once practiced being me, I found a single gold link from a watch. I picked it up. It was heavy, fake. I'd had the Cartier appraised while the FBI was processing the evidence. It was a high-end replica, a super clone. Nathaniel couldn't even afford the real thing for his mistress. He'd spent my money on a lie wrapped in another lie. "He never really had the capital, did he, Leon?" I whispered. My dog let out a short, sharp huff. He was bored with this house. So was I. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jack Hardy, my lead counsel. "Joan Augley's confession is signed and notarized. She's moving into the condo tomorrow. She asked if you'd pay for the movers. I told her the Bank of Paige is permanently closed." I deleted the thread. I didn't need the satisfaction of her struggle. I just needed her out of my balance sheet. I grabbed my keys and the small leather bag I'd kept packed. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the memories, was staying. I didn't want to sit on a sofa that had held their weight. I didn't want to look at art that had witnessed their betrayal. I walked to the front door and deactivated the security system. The red light turned green, then went dark. "Let's go, Leon," I said. I didn't lock the door behind me. The new owners were arriving in an hour, and I was already miles away in my head. I got into the car, Leon jumping into the back seat with a sense of purpose he hadn't shown in years. I drove toward the coast, the city skyline shrinking in the mirror. For 12 years, I had been the foundation.